What is up, most distinguished patrons of this channel? On today's episode, we are going to find out what is inside of this box. So let's get into it. So this video is sponsored, and no, not from a company, but a buddy of mine bought this and basically gave it to me to look at after he took it out of the box and looked at it and wanted to get my opinion on it and thought it would be useful for you people out on the internet that might be looking at this. And what we have is, imagine that, a welding helmet. And this one comes from a company called Tefauwe. I'm probably butchering that name. I don't know very much about this other than I happen to look at the Amazon listing on this, and it seemed like it had a lot of good reviews, and it's been a while since I've done any kind of sugar scoop pipeline or hood, and I thought we would look at this together. Now, I have not seen this at all, so it's going to be interesting to see what we're dealing with here, because I am a fan of the sugar scoop pipeliners, and the one that I use is a Honeywell fiber metal, and it works great, and I have no reason to change it. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of quality this has, because these are pretty affordable from what I saw on Amazon. So let's open it up. So this is quite a interesting hood. I didn't know what to expect, and this has got a black metallic finish on it, like a paint job, and I have never seen that on a weld hood before where it's metallic like that. That's pretty interesting. It comes with a pretty decent bag by the look of it, which, I mean, let's face it, these things get so beat up if you actually use them for work that you're just going to end up giving the bag to your girlfriend or your wife so she can put some junk in it, and then it's going to disappear anyways, and it's just, you just deal with the fact that it's going to get beat up. Comes with a couple replacement screens, which two of them probably won't last that long in the real world. Does have a plastic spring. So a lot of the higher end hoods, like the sugar scoops, come with metal inserts to hold all of the screens. So your front and your back screen and your cartridge. This one uses plastic. That's not really the end of the world. My Honeywell fiber metal uses plastic, and I haven't broken that yet. But looking at this, like I said, this is more or less like, almost looks like automotive paint, that it's super high gloss and very metallic. So interesting there. Now this hood does feature a flip up lens, so I like that. Just looking at it here, the positioning of these, I'm kind of not a huge fan of. I like to have a hook on the bottom so that I can slip my hand and hook it and open it. This only has them on the side, not a big deal. For average work, this would probably be fine, but that is a departure from a lot of them that are out there. Doesn't seem to have overly strong of a spring, which is good. Nothing's worse than using these where they like snap open and they're a pain to close, or vice versa. By the look of it, that's actually a second spring, so it comes with a second internal spring to hold the lens in here. So if you break or lose the first one, you're not SOL. So this has interesting lens retention in it. It has this plastic piece that clips into the side here and here, and it's adjustable for depth, and that more or less keeps your lens in. That could be good. I think it would work okay. I'm used to ones that slip through the side here, and they more or less can't fall out. So if this was open like this and you were to drop the hood, I don't think it would, but it'd be easier for everything to fall out of here versus it would have to slide out the side. The good thing is this is adjustable for a lot of different shade thicknesses for like auto darkening cartridges, so that's I guess, a plus that it has quite a bit of adjustment where a lot of different models will fit. I'm not sure how much you can see on here. A lot of that looks like dust probably is dust, but this has quite a bit of metallic sheen to it. Sparkles. That's pretty interesting. Also, on the interesting scale, I like the fact that they painted this flat black on the inside. And I talked about that in some of the other welding hood review videos I did, where I think it's a gross oversight to put shiny internal paint or finish on a welding hood, because the backlight will reflect around into your eyes and make it a hell of a lot harder to weld with. So I really like the fact that they didn't overlook that. Now, one of the more interesting things to me is this headband. I have never seen a headband with this big of a back pad. Now, this, interestingly enough, does not have foam on it at all. They use just rigid plastic, which I don't see as being a detriment, but I've never seen one this big. I mean, this is gigantic, so I'll have to try this on and let you know what I think of the initial comfort. The headband on here is kind of chintzy, but honestly, this isn't too far from what's on my Miller welding hood, which that's a $300 hood, so I guess, you know, is it acceptable? Yeah, it's not too bad. You're probably going to want to change that out after a month or two of wear. It'll probably be worn out. This does feature adjustment to where you can slide the headgear forward and backwards away from the front of the hood, which that's nice. I always tell people to look for that so that you can tailor it to the size of your dome. It has adjusters on both sides, and what that's for is when this thing tips down, by adjusting what pin position this is in, it allows you to control it from slamming you in your face. And I don't know why, but a lot of cheaper and even expensive welding hoods only have a stop on one side of the hood, and what I find is when you flip them down when they only have one stop, this thing kind of sits all cocked on your head, kind of like this. It twists, and it's just uncomfortable. It's annoying. So the fact that they have two adjustments for that, it should sit flat on your face when you flip it down, so that's a plus. Now, this clicker in here seems to be decent, but this is what fails on almost every cheap hood I've ever had. It doesn't take long before all of a sudden it doesn't hold adjustment, but sometimes even higher end, more expensive hoods have the same problem. So that's one of those things that I don't get why it's so hard to make one that lasts. I mean, I've seen welding hoods that are 30 years old that still have the original back strap and a mechanism, and they work just fine. So how on earth something with modern technology can be made that doesn't last with this? You know, this seems to be okay, but who knows? All bets are off if that's going to last. If you happen to have this hood, leave in the comments if you've had reliability issues with that. Now, the plastic this is made out of is pretty cheap and chintzy. Again, I'll have to put this on my head and test it out a little bit to get an opinion on comfort-wise, but plastic that looks like this generally is pretty brittle in the cold and generally doesn't last that long, but honestly, I don't know, this is thick enough to where I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. Going back to the hood itself, I didn't realize this. This is actually chopped off on the bottom of it. So that's a huge plus in my opinion, because these things tend to be so long on the bottom that if you try and look downwards, it ends up digging into your neck. So this appears to be pre-chopped. So it came that way. That's a pretty slick feature. I like that. The top of it also is chopped a little bit, which gives a little bit more clearance on it, and it'll probably fit a hard hat better. Now, I'm not a huge fan of their purple name on it, but, you know, and that's printed on it, like that's paint, so you're not getting that off easily without wrecking this finish. So speaking of that, my buddy's probably going to kill me for all these fingerprints on it, but whatever. I just won't say anything when I give it back to him. But yeah, you could just put a sticker right over this if you wanted to, but I'm not a huge fan of branding on it. I thought this was a nice touch. So they have like this little silicone washer that's in this mechanism to where when you tighten the side down with this nut, that more or less adds friction to the side of the hood, so you're better able to control how it falls down when you move your head forward and how easy it is to move up and down. My Honeywell fiber metal had some really slick Teflon washers, and it kind of was a pain in the ass to get it to where it would adjust to where it fell down the way I wanted to. So that's a nice touch, and I'm surprised that they did it and that they didn't do the same thing Honeywell did. So that's a big plus in my book. All right, well, let me get this back together and put it on and see what I think of it. All right, the moment of truth. Let me put this sucker on. So putting it on, the headgear feels hard, like it's stiff plastic, but it's also about 24 degrees in the tin shed here, so the plastic's probably colder than hell, and that's probably a big reason as to why. It's shockingly light. And let me take this off. Like, this sucker is far lighter than I expected, and it's light. It's got to be lighter than my fiber metal hood. It's very light, so that's good. When you put it on your head, this would be like on your head, you can see how far it tips up, and it more or less balances like perfectly on your head. Like, this would be like the middle of your head. It's like almost perfect, which if you do a lot of welding and you flip this sucker up and down, like having a heavy ass helmet or a hood, and where it only comes up this far, it torques your neck so much. So the fact this comes up real high and is light, really easy on the neck. The headgear feels cheap, mainly probably because there's no padding in the back. It doesn't feel bad. And the pressure is actually pretty good. That big wide rear pad on it, or plastic pad, kind of spreads the tension to where like I can torque it down and it doesn't feel like it's trying to pull my head like a grape or something. So that's good. Let me flip the sucker down. Another interesting thing is when I flip this down somehow, and I have a big dome, my chin is actually above this, so my eyes are directly level with the window. And I've seen it on cheaper hoods like this where when I flip it down, my eyes end up being in the wrong spot to look through the lens. This is actually lined up perfectly. Now, you do have some adjustment here to raise and lower your head. There's not a whole lot that's in the middle here, but that actually fits me pretty good right where it's at. And shockingly enough, this does not clip my chin, even with my big head. So that is also good. One of the things I don't like about the chopped hoods like this, and this isn't just this unit, you got to be very careful depending on what kind of welding you're doing, because if you don't have a turtleneck or a buttoned up shirt and you leave a little bit of skin exposed on your neck, these things are cut so short that you can get UV reflection off of like a polished surface. Like even this welding table, it'll come from the table straight up under here and burn the hell out of your neck, and you'll look like, you know, a lobster or something. And you don't want to be a lobster, nor do you want skin cancer. So I'm a bigger fan of running like what they call a beard, where you have leather or some kind of a fabric to protect, to drape down, to cover your neck like a bib. If you don't have that, you got to be careful on these chopped hoods. You're going to get sunburned pretty easily depending on what kind of position welds you're doing. But like I said, shockingly enough, this does fit my big old dome. I'm not a big fan of how open this is on the top because of how much light it lets through, but the benefit of this chop design is, well, one, it probably fits with a hard hat adapter a little bit better, and two, it's probably going to stay a lot cooler and your lens isn't going to fog up as much. So I don't see that as a negative, and like I said, a lot of guys just do this anyways, so they're kind of saving you a step by chopping it for you. Other than that, the self-adjusters work good. The way that this tensions is actually better than my Honeywell fiber metal. I feel like you can dial it in to exactly what you want. I'm going to have to get some of those silicone washers and do the same thing to my Honeywell that this does, because that's a good idea and it works good. Let me check how well its detents work for the upright position. So I thought this had like a detent to hold it in an upright position where it wouldn't like fall down, but it doesn't appear to. And by tensioning these, it works good enough, and it's so light it's not going to fall down on you like a lot of the cheaper hoods. So interesting. Well, let's go to conclusion. So I know I didn't test any lens in this, and the truth is, well, it doesn't come with one, and the second truth is that all the lenses, there's so many variables in it, you just got to find one that you like, and it's really irrelevant to the actual hood. But I gotta say, for the money, this is actually built far better than I would have expected, and I think this thing would last quite a while, and it is also very comfortable, more comfortable than I would have thought. I do like the fact that it's chopped on the bottom, so I can look straight down and it barely touches my neck. So for super tight out of position welds, I think this sucker would work really good. Where I think this thing comes up short is the way that you can open this lens. I wish that they would have had something that was down here too. Force a habit, I'm going to continually reach for that little nub. Nothing's there, so I would have to retrain my brain on how to use this. I'm not necessarily sold on their lens retention system in here over having a slot. I think that in the long run it might be harder to not have that fall out. And there's, of course, a lot of unknowns. Like, I don't know how long the headgear ratchet mechanism or how long this is going to last, the spring, before something breaks. But honestly, for the price, this punches above its weight, I would say. Now, honestly, everything I mentioned so far is kind of like, who cares really, especially for what you paid. But I have a lot of doubts as to the longevity of this paint job. I feel that they would have been better off leaving it a matte finish, and maybe you can get this in a matte finish or some other finish, but this sparkly gloss paint is not going to hold up, and I hope that it doesn't just peel off of here. Because paint on plastic, when the plastic gets hot and melty, the paint ends up generally peeling off. So I'm not too sure on how long that's going to last. So don't expect this thing to look as good as it does for long if you actually weld like in position with it. As far as would I buy this, I mean, honestly, for the price, it's really not a bad deal, and it saves you buying a normal one and chopping it up. In the headgear, the adjustability seems to work pretty good. So yeah, I think this would fall under the category of something that I would consider. Now, truth be told, the company that makes this, I have one of their welding lenses, or 2x4 welding lens that I've used for quite some time. It's actually in my pancake hood up on the wall over there, and I've had no real issues with that. So I think that the brand, at least from what I've seen, is pretty decent. So if you're in the market for something like this, honestly, my opinion, number one is to go to the Honeywell fiber metal first. I know it's probably double the price of this, but if you buy that and get better knobs for the side, that'll last a whole career. This, I don't know how long it's going to last, but for just screwing around in the shop or on a tighter budget, the way this comes out of the box is pretty freaking set up. I would say it would probably work pretty good for you. So you can decide what'll work better for you, but when in doubt, go with the fiber metal. It's the way to go. Anyways, thanks for sticking around for the video. If you've used this or have any opinion, leave it in the comments. Otherwise, until next time.